Good afternoon and welcome to What If You Could with your host Brian Searcy. I'm extremely excited today to have as my guest Chad Hennings. So a lot of people talk about his time at the Cowboys, but I'm going to go chronologically with talking about your background a little bit here. So Chad graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He was a very distinguished college football player, but then he followed up on that graduation and served his country. He had 45 missions in combat flying the A-10. From there, after he finished his Air Force career, he went on to play football for the Dallas Cowboys. 9 years with the Dallas Cowboys, 3 Super Bowl rings. So all you Dallas Cowboy fans here, when we got those 3 Super Bowls, Chad was a big part of that. He's also been on the board of Community Christian in Action. Just left that recently, but he is always helping at-risk kids and at-risk people in our community. So What If You Could was started is part of Main Street Pilot, and that is to try and attack the problems today and the divisiveness that we have, the lack of decency, the anger that we see in the people that are out there, and the lack of responsibility that is being focused in our society today. So we got to try and solve those problems, and Main Street Pilot is doing that by addressing the lack of personal problems, that epidemic that is out there. That is something that Chad has been working on pretty much his adult life, as an entrepreneur, a husband, a father, and a mentor. And I'm just really excited to have him on today. And I'm going to start with my first question, Chad. So one of the things you focus on is excellence. Tell us about your thoughts on excellence.
You know, first of all, Brian, thank you for having me on. I love what you're doing, and I think it's something that is very essential in our culture and in our society today. But I try to encourage individuals. I've tried to live my life of excellence and encourage individuals, whether that be individuals or corporations, about what excellence is. And to me, excellence is, it's not a destination. It's not something where you arrive. It's a journey. It's a process. It's taking into consideration such things as, what is your identity? Who do you define yourself to be? And then following those things, your relationships, your belief system, your commitment, your character, and ultimately it's living. Where do you want to end at the end of your days? That legacy that you want to leave behind, and it ultimately ends up regarding your relationships with people. How have you impacted those around you in the garden that you've been planted in? How have you impacted their lives, and hopefully for the good?
That's great. One of the things that I just picked up on is you talk about you need to know what your identity is. You need to know who you are. Main Street Pilot talks about who you are the decisions that you make that then defines your character. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. I think our nation, our country, and this is why I so appreciate what you're doing, I truly believe we're at a crisis of identity. Who are we as individuals? That it's just that filter, that worldview that people have where you pass your thoughts, your words, your experiences through, your actions through, that provide that meaning and that purpose. And we've been so inundated, particularly probably over the last 50 years in this country, that there is no such things as truth. There's moral relativity, that your emotions, your thoughts, your truth is as valid as mine. And just by the definition of truth, there can't be more than one truth. It either is truth or it's not truth. And when everybody has that sense of entitlement, that sense of it's all about me, we can't come together as a nation nor a community.
Well, it's also the lack of the ability to have the personal skills that we talk about when people don't learn that it's okay for other people to have their own opinion, right? We forget what the Founding Fathers set forth in our country. It's the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I say it almost every time I have this podcast, is I thought and still believe today that our Founding Fathers were some of the smartest people out there because of the simple ways that they were going to get us to be successful. Strive for happiness. But to do that, you've got to have these personal skills, and you've got to have that foundational system that you're talking about.
Amen to that. And I agree with you and the Founding Fathers. And it's with the epidemic of lack of personal skills because of kids today. I got my kids growing up, they're high school, college age kids that, their peer group has their interpersonal skills are all about social media through their iPads or through their smart device. That they don't have the interpersonal skills, and they don't have the filter where they just throw everything out there, and whatever sticks. And unfortunately, it's you lose that sense of truth and of purpose through that.
And it also talks a little bit about, because of them always being on social media and always in those types of things, and to what your point was, it's all about me, it's all about them. They really haven't learned empathy. What are your thoughts on the fact that they don't even really know what that word means.
Well, when you don't have an actual person in front of you, you can't see their reactions, that they're hurt. And this is why cyberbullying is that, unfortunately it's I don't want to say at an epidemic standpoint, but where kids are committing suicide over this, that a lot of times kids don't feel, or they don't get to see the results of negative words or insulting things that they put out there, that they can't experience personal empathy.
Absolutely. And scary statistic, 81% of kids in high school are bullied today. Now, there's two sides to that coin. There is much more bullying today because of social media, because it's anonymous, all of those things. But I would also argue that part of that statistic are people that no longer have a thick skin, that the simplest things now offend people. So that number is skewed to a certain degree, but the number itself is scary.
It is, and I think I agree with that thick skin, particularly for young men, the aspect of what is masculinity, that they talk about toxic masculinity. But I grew up where some of these kids today, if they had the experiences that probably you and I had growing up with the coaches, and particularly going through pilot training in the Air Force, where you were called every name in the book at some point in time, but you realize that individual cared for you, and you got to water off a duck's back. Sometimes you just got to let it flow.
Well, and to your point about pilot training, so we both have an Air Force background. We've been through probably more hot washes than we could ever think of, and nothing was sacred. Nobody's feelings were ever considered or concerned in that. I wonder if young men and women were to go into that kind of environment, if they would survive. Just something for thought.
Something for thought is correct.
We don't have to get into that. So another key thing that Chad works on a regular basis, and what he speaks on when he goes and talks to organizations, is his focus on character. Chad, tell us a little bit about that.
You bet, Brian. I wrote a book, came out a couple years ago, called Forces of Character, where I wanted to highlight that character is a choice, that it's ubiquitous. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or your gender. It is a choice. And I define an individual that is a force of character, someone who lives to be their best self every day. They encourage others to do the same. And then any organizations or associations or groups that they're affiliated with, they encourage it to rise to a higher noble purpose or cause. So bottom line, it's not about you. It's about that servant leadership piece. It's about caring for others. It's about having those character traits, whether that be moral or functional character, about honesty, courage, willingness to listen to others, empathy, as we talked about. Those are all character traits that I think it is truly a choice and can be taught to individuals.
I couldn't agree more, and again, that's what Main Street Pilot is focused on. But one of the key things that you just talked about, I'd like to get a little bit more of your thoughts on, and that is listening. I think that's a lost skill. Pretty much everywhere I go, and when I talk to parents, or I'm talking to kids in high schools or young kids, I always talk about listening, because what happens today, in my opinion, and in observations, I think statistics show it, is that people today listen to respond. They've already made up their mind. They've already decided what they think the facts are, even though we're talking about opinions. So they don't listen to participate. They don't listen to ask questions. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a big difference between hearing and listening. Hearing means, okay, I heard what you said, but listening, I didn't either comprehend it, internalize it, nor appreciate your opinion with that. And unfortunately, I think, again, back to kids, the social media aspect, I'm putting out my thoughts. These are my feelings out there, and I don't care what you think. And then it's the aspect of, hey, I'm going to rebut you, or you're not having the empathy, and the cyberbullying, and thus the spiral down of our culture regarding relationships. But I think listening is a lost skill that needs to be taught, and it's however we can do that with our as parents of kids, or at schools, or what you're doing at Main Street Pilot, it needs to be brought back.
And I think parents is one of the key parts. I talk to administrators in K through 12. I talk to higher education, and they're teaching hard skills. They're teaching STEM, the science, the technology, the engineering, and the math. They don't know how to teach these skills yet. So we've got to re-energize a way that can be learned. And
it's one of those things that's it's taught, but taught often, and it needs to be for true transformation to occur with anybody, they have to internalize it and then practice it themselves.
Have to make it personal, and it has to be something that becomes a habit.
Amen.
You have to replace those bad habits with the good habits. So I met you about 7 years ago, not long after I retired from the Air Force. I was actually reading a book, flying from Georgia to Texas. It was one of your books. It was about an organization you started called Wingman. I was very fortunate to get involved with that. That was actually transformational for me as a Christian, because I had come out of the Air Force where you couldn't really practice your faith, at least not openly as an officer. You could do it in your private life, but you lived by your actions, but you couldn't let people know about your actions, which was always very, very frustrating. And on a side note, I think it's actually gotten worse since I retired in 2010. But it was transformational. You brought me in. You allowed me to do some great things at Wingman. So I would like you to share with the audience today what Wingman is all about.
Wingman, I started Wingman out of a personal need that, again, this aspect of what is masculinity in our culture. And I was struggling with some personal issues with the health of my son at the time, where I never really, our culture taught to be a man was meant to be, like John Wayne standing in Main Street, or Rambo, where you go out and conquer the world on your own, that you cannot admit weakness, that you cannot admit that you're struggling with anything. And that is as far from the truth as you can be. And out of that is what was the impetus for me to start Wingman. Was I desired relationships with other guys, that you can form those transparent, Christ-centered, masculine relationships where I could, in essence, open up the kimono and say, guys, I'm struggling with this. I don't have it together. I need, just pray with me, or help me, just walk through with me. Be a wingman. And I use that analogy of being a wingman because when we would fly missions, either training missions or missions in combat, you would never go by yourself. You always had your wingman there with you. And the likelihood of you accomplishing your mission depended upon how well you work together as a team. And it's the same way in life. So what we're all about is encouraging men to form those relationships, but then to also get out into the community and do something. Just do it. I don't care what you do, just do it. So the two main criteria that I have with guys is, get together, be Christ-centered, and then do works in the community. So we partner with other nonprofits and other charity groups that are doing prison ministry. They're doing workspace projects, evangelism, I don't care. Just do it.
And one of the things I talk about with how to change bad behavior into new and good behavior, it's, as we just talked about, it's got to be something that's practiced. It's got to be something that you do on a regular basis. Personal skills, leadership, flying an airplane, these are all perishable skills. If you don't do those on a regular basis, you're not going to be good at them. And not only that, you've also got to realize that you are never going to be the expert. You always have something to learn. One of the things that I think is great about Wingman, in addition to what you just talked about, is that this isn't just something that people go to once a month. You've got a structure set up, so it is something that's continuous. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, just on your point, I appreciate that. One of the things I talk about in forces of character, to me, is character is kinetic. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest unless there's an external force that acts upon that. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. So these are skill sets that you have to repeat over and over and over, and you utilize it. And when you're doing good things, it's easier to do good things. When you're doing bad things, it's easier to continue to do bad things. And those
becomes a bad behavior, absolutely.
Until you have an external force that acts upon that. So what we do is predominantly twofold. I try to create a relationship funnel. If you can imagine a funnel, at the top of that, we do corporate events where we bring in speakers. We do put on gatherings in different locations throughout the Metroplex here in Dallas, and then we're starting to break out into other geographical areas of the country where guys just come kind of dip their toe in community and hang out with other guys and be motivated and inspired. But again, that's not where the transformational component happens. It happens when you move further down this relationship funnel to small group ministries that we have called Elements. And these are where guys, 3 or 4 guys up to 12, 14 guys get together on opposing weeks, corporate one week, element the other week, and vice versa. They go back and forth. And this is where, the life happens, where you do a deeper dive in relationships. But ultimately at the neck of that funnel is the one-on-one discipleship. And that's truly where the rubber meets the road. When you can look across from another individual that challenges you, how's your day? How you doing? And he can see by looking in your eyes, you telling me the truth or you BSing me. And when you open up your life to another individual where you're giving them that permission to be accountable, that's where true life happens, and that's where true accountability and change happens.
It is very powerful. I can speak from experience. I've met so many awesome people that I'm still in contact with. That it is absolutely amazing. So, Chad, for the men that are listening today that are in the Metroplex, or I guess you've started an organization in Atlanta, where can they go to get more information, to find out about when Wingman meets, where the elements are in the Metroplex or in Atlanta, those types of things?
You can go to the Wingman website, Wingmen, with an E, wingmen.org. Or if they wanted to reach out to me, you can go to my website, chadhennings.com.
And at chadhennings.com, that's where they can also find out more about Focus on Character.
Yes, Forces of Character.
Or Forces of Character.
You can go to Forces of Character, or the different things that I'm involved with too, from a speaking standpoint, and the different books that I've written.
Well, that's great, Chad. I want to thank you again for being on the show today. I love the conversation that we have. We both have a passion to try to solve a bunch of the problems that are out there. And thank you very much.
Hey, Brian. Appreciate it. Thank you again for what you're doing.
Thanks. We'll talk soon. Everybody, thank you very much for listening to What If You Could with Chad Hennings today. I loved the conversation. Make sure you tune in. There won't be an episode next Friday on the 29th, but we will be back right after the 4th of July. Again, thanks for tuning in to What If You Could.